Today we got on three-time NBA champion Alex Caruso to talk us through some fantasy football takes. Let's do it, gang. Must have sent the link to the wrong person. I am Liam Murphy. Alex, how you doing today, man?
Liam, I'm so excited to get through this show. It's gonna be great to talk some league winners and a lot of other really interesting stuff today. The off season is quickly approaching to its end. Preseason's about to start. This is my favorite time of year. It feels like Christmas morning as we're starting to get our first fantasy football drafts in. So I just cannot wait for all the drafts, all the talk. And once week one starts, I am just going to be beyond overjoyed.
Yeah, I think we are 33 days away.
Is that it?
From the NFL starting officially. The first game. So coming in on a month. I know I'm getting a lot of drafts down, a little fatigue here and there. It's okay to take a break too. But Alex, the first thing I like to do when I have a new guest on the channel is, kind of soft interview them and get to know their history. How did they get their start in fantasy football? Did you start playing as a kid? How'd you get into the industry? So could you tell the people, your story?
Yeah, so I started playing fantasy football like when I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. Just from I never played real fantasy football, but my dad used to play on ESPN sites doing the pigskin pick'em and the eliminator challenge and fantasy football gridiron, which is like a salary cap where if your players did well, they increased your salary cap and you could sell them off. And I got my start in that. But I didn't start my first fantasy football league until I was 14 or 15 years old. And after I did, I was just completely hooked. And beyond that, the whole podcast, fantasy analyst thing, whatever you want to call it, was just completely by accident. About three years ago, almost to the day, a couple of friends of mine wanted to start a Boston sports podcast because I grew up near Boston. And we did 2 episodes of a Boston sports podcast, just talking about the Patriots and the Celtics. And I was hooked, even though I probably talked the least out of the 3 of us. And then they decided just to give up the show. They're like, we're done with this. We don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, I kind of had fun. So why not start my own fantasy football podcast? And, on a whim, I decided I had no mic. I had no notes. I literally was just holding my phone up to my mouth and recording on Anchor. And I was just beyond hooked. And that's kind of really how it got started.
I grew up in New Hampshire myself, so we probably grew up in a similar area. And then how did you go from that to working in the industry? Talk us through that.
Yeah. So I just, the first year I did it, I just did the podcast. I didn't really post anywhere else. It was literally just, I think I did about 50 podcast episodes. I didn't have that many guests on. I just tried to be consistent. And I was only getting maybe 20 people to watch each podcast. And the second year, I decided to kind of just get on Twitter a little bit. And a friend of mine said, you should just try out TikTok. And I did both. And then I got a couple shout outs on Twitter that kind of gave me my first 1,000 followers or so. And that my TikTok that year blew up because I was posting training camp news updates when, videos were low quality back then. No one was reporting training camp news. And I went from 5,000 to 30,000 in a matter of a couple weeks on TikTok and just tried to take advantage. And then, over time, I kind of expanded to doing Twitter and other things that kind of led to where we are today.
Yeah. Getting up on other platforms is definitely something I've been lazy about. I don't think I'm too great at growing my Twitter either. You though, I want to say you were at 10,000 Twitter followers last year, and now you're close to, let's see here, you are at 80,000 today. So talk us through that. How do you go? You've kind of waded into the Twitter thread scene. Some people get really up in arms about Twitter threads. I don't have any issue with them. I may even do some myself. I think for the casual fantasy football person, they're a great resource. Gets you the info. It's quick. And it's a way to, use the time you're putting into research to grow. So talk us through that. Has it been threads? Was it really, strategic collabs with people? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, like I don't blame people who hate threads. Like I get it. But again, like so last year it was like about July 1st when I just decided that like I want to make this, full time. I had a year left in college and I was like, whatever it is going to take to be able to do this full time, I'm willing to do. And I saw that Twitter threads were popping off and I decided to kind of just start writing them. And after I wrote one thread and I gained like 2 or 3,000 followers in 24 hours.
Wow.
And like at the time I was at 7,000 followers. So I went to 10K like overnight, and that like tripled, like not tripled, but it went, my growth on my Twitter went up by like 30%, whatever it was. And after I saw that, it was like, okay, I am going to like wring the living crap out of this, like until it like the juice runs out. And like it was spammy. And of course, like I got a lot of hate for it because like I was growing my following really quickly. But for me, it was like, I want to make this full time. I think that it's valuable for like most casual people. Like I know for other fantasy football analysts, Twitter threads are spammy. They're not attractive. They're spammy, but they're definitely useful for like a lot of the casual people. But I don't blame people for hate them. But so I grew over July and August. Like I think it was like I grew like 55,000. Like when I was at over 60,000, come the start of the season, just because like I was up until 3 or 4 a.m. like every night, spending like 6 hours per thread at the time, just because it was like, this is what's working. So like I stopped kind of worrying about TikTok or anything else. It was just purely like I'm focused on threads and nothing else. And I think they changed the algorithm a little bit, so they're not as valuable now, but they've still been super big for growth for me. But pretty much 95% of my growth was literally just off doing these Twitter threads and, just wringing all the juice you could possibly can out of them, but also trying to make sure I'm giving people good information. I don't just write them to write spammy stuff. Like I think that I try to really focus on giving really helpful stats and giving them to people over and over again for the people that don't always see them.
Yeah, I click on the threads, obviously I'm a hardcore grinder, and even I'll click on the threads and like be like, oh, okay, let's see if some of my takes are with or without them. And I'm a big like ends justify the means person, where I feel like some people don't want to do threads because it's not quote unquote cool to like the grinders, right? And some people who are like doing a lot of best ball drafts would get angry at that. And it's like, dude, it's not about you. It's a little bit of jealousy too, I'm sure, just like seeing a big analyst and someone who maybe has been drafted since may feel like, I know this info, like, and it's like, okay, well, it's not for you, man. And yeah, it's a little bit like clickbait, but if you're giving good info, you're growing your following, right? Like that's what really matters. So like, like I tout that I won contest, and sometimes people will be like, oh, is he going to mention he won a contest? It's like, bro, like I'm doing a free YouTube video at almost every day here, spending an hour plus, like I'm trying to grow too. So, and I definitely think your threads are high quality. So I'm totally cool with them. It seems like there's really like a trio of threads. It started with Salvetri, and then Joe got in the game, and now you got in the game, and there's even some others popping up. Maybe I'll be in there in a year or so myself.
You definitely should. It works. Again, like I know that. I mean, I will say, like we deserve, probably the hate that like we get for writing them, whether it's the Sal or the Joes. Like,
I'm not. It's just people jealous.
I'm not gonna stop them. But I'm just like, I'm not like acknowledging that. Like, I think that this isn't like, it isn't clickbait or it isn't like a little bit spammy. Like again, it's good information. We talked about that, but like, I don't blame the people that don't like them. But I am definitely not gonna stop anytime soon, because again, if this is how you pay your bills and you're providing people good info at the same time, then, I think that both of those things can be true at the same time.
100%. Well, that's great to hear, man. Looking forward to you to cross that 1 mil mark in 2 to 3 years. Maybe I'll hit 10K by then. But let's move on to what's your relation? This is usually we do a lot of best ball content over here. What's your relationship with the best ball? Maybe over the years, like how many drafts are you trying to get in? Are you more of a managed guy, a dynasty guy? Talk to us about that.
I probably play redraft more than anything. I mean, I think that I've been a little bit behind the 8 ball on stuff as far as best ball goes. Like I did last year, I think I did about 30 best ball drafts. I'll probably end up doing about the same thing here. I definitely have, probably contrary to what I should be doing. Like I haven't engaged as much in the best ball stuff because I know there's a lot of people out there that are really great with the strategy. And I've just tried to take my time and focus and more just focus on other things because there's people like you that are the strategy experts and whatnot. And it just didn't end up being something. So I do a good amount of redraft. I do a little bit of dynasty. I do a little bit of best ball, but I just try to spread myself out, I guess, as much as I can, but I probably should be focusing a little bit more on one thing, but I've tried to just be at least a good, more than average knower of like multiple different formats.
Yeah, I think that's fine. You don't need to do 1,000 best ball drafts to talk and know fantasy football. Let's run through some league winners.
Sure.
Let's top it off with you. Who are quote unquote your guys, and let's kind of go through, I guess, the rounds of a draft. So like the first 4 rounds, who are some guys you are just very confident? We can even like run through a thread you've done or, but let's lead it off with what the people want. These are the people who are going to win your league.
I think the people that are gonna, increase your chances to win your league, as it would say. I think the first guy that I think of is, as far as I would start in round 2. I think round 1's everyone's good in round 1.
Yeah.
It's probably Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably the guy in round 2 that I find myself really, really trying to get the most in the middle of round 2 right now. He's the most tied for the most receptions through any player through a first 2 years. All we've seen this offseason is even more reports about just like the target monster that, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been for the Lions. Obviously, Jameson Williams out 6 games. I'm a big believer in Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, but they're still rookies, and rookies don't generally command a super high target share. And I think that ultimately, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is like a lock for 150 plus targets. And a lot of people have been pointing out over the last couple of days that, since he began his crazy stretch in week 13 of 2021, he's been the wide receiver 3 in points per game behind only Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson. And I think that generally, looking through every receiver in the top 10, like players that got better their first 2 years usually got even better in the 3rd year. And so if you take that with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think that he's still going to ascend, and there's just no one that's commanding targets at a higher volume than him. He was one of 2 players last year with over a 30% target rate.
Yeah, the Sun God won me $1 million, so I'm a big fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a guy who I even will take after, kind of like after Diggs in the first. I just feel he is has an incredibly high floor, especially in PPR, where it's like it's hard to see him not scoring around 20 as like a minimum, right, each week. Whereas like AJ Brown is going to give you some games where he scores 40. But he's also going to have some games where he goes like 6 catches for 40. Amon-Ra feels pretty safe for like 8 to 10 targets a game. Going to get a lot of touchdowns. Jameson Williams is not returning. So an absolute very safe first, second round pick. Let's move a little bit down the board. Let's start getting into and I'll pull up a draft board here to help our visualize this. The running backs, there's not a lot of running backs that I think are comfy clicks in best ball land at a certain point. Like once we get past, let's just pull up. Where's the NFL season? Am I missing something? Oh, here we go. So we'll just go with a draft I did this morning. The picks are not important, but let's get to, or here, I'll do this. We'll just share the draft board. Okay, so once we get to, make sure we can see the whole board. Once we get to this like 4th, 5th, 6th round, so I'm talking about guys like, past ETN. So this is like ETN, Ken Walker, Aaron Jones, Najee, Madison, Sanders, Dameon Pierce, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, Swift, James Conner, Rashad White, James Cook. Like, who are the guys in that range that you are comfortable betting on? Because I think we can all see the bull case for all these running backs, but they all have questions too, right? With Najee, it's like, how many points will that offense score? Plus Jalen Warren is a thing. With ETN, it's the Tank Bigsby thing. It's like, is he going to get goal line touches? You know, with Cam Akers, it's like, well, he had that amazing 3-game stretch, but then we know like Sean McVay hates him half the time too. So who for you are the guys that you feel best betting on?
I think for me, the first guy, I mean, going at the top round by round, has got to be Joe Mixon. I mean, the fantasy points pointed out that Joe Mixon was second in expected fantasy points last year among all running backs. Number 1 was Austin Eckler. The other running backs in the top 5 were Josh Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey, and Saquon Barkley. So everyone loves to talk about, oh, Joe Mixon was only good because of that 5-touchdown game. But as far as like what he was expected, it was actually a lot better than that. And he was as good as any running back. Samaje Perine is gone, opens up more touches. And like, you know, when Joe Mixon has been healthy, I mean, 4 straight seasons where he played half the year or more, he finishes the running back 13 or better. So I think he's safe, but also in terms of what he had for expected points last year in a career best pass catching season, I think that he has upside for a little bit more. The next guy that I'm absolutely in love with is definitely Rachaad White. I mean, the coach speak, you know, all offseason has been, he's our 3-down back. He's going to be our workhorse. I mean, in Scott Barrett's draft plan article today, he dropped that, you know, Adam Kaplan, NFL reporter, was saying that the Bucs are just absolutely in love with Rachaad White, and they plan to run their offense through him, and especially with him having the highest PFF receiving grade in his draft class. Baker Mayfield has been above average in throwing to running backs every year. He's another one I really like. And the third guy is definitely James Conner. Again, Marlon Mack has been confirmed as the running back too. And, you know, Marlon Mack has not been good in a very long time. And James Conner has been, you know, well documented, number 1 running back in points per game when Kyler Murray's out. Their head coach said we're very comfortable with him as our bell cow, and he's been a top 10 running back in points per game in back-to-back years. Those are the 3 guys that I think I really am in love with the most.
I see the case for all of them. You know, for those doing best ball drafts, I do think you should know in a contest like Best Ball Mania 4, Joe Mixon's ADP opened in the 8th and 9th round. So just like for me right there, that's just a no, right? Like I just choose not to compete with the teams. But that's not what Alex is talking about. He's just talking about like Joe Mixon can be a good player. I don't disagree with that. I'm also personally I still think he could be suspended. I mean, this guy before an NFL playoff game allegedly had a road rage incident where he pointed a gun at a lady and intimidated her and said, "I should kill you right now." All right. Like, you know, I'm not saying there's not other bad people in the NFL, but that right there is like, is Joe Mixon good enough to hold on to your team? I don't know if I love his week 17 matchup against the Chiefs for tournaments too, where it's like, I kind of want to play the Bengals through the air, but he could absolutely bury me where, yeah, I could see, especially if Joe Burrow, you know, if you believe Jamar Chase might not play until week 5, I would imagine it would be a lot of Joe Mixon. You know, Travion Williams and Chase Brown's probably not the stiffest competition. With James Conner, unquestioned workhorse, and Rachaad White, both seem like unquestioned workhorses, but like how do you weigh in how bad the offense could be? Where it's like these are 2 teams who, you know, on a half-point PPR site like Underdog, we need touchdowns. So if your team's scoring 10, 20 points a week, it's just kind of hard to get those touchdowns. On James Conner end as well, it's like if the Cardinals are 2-14, are they going to be riding James Conner in the fantasy playoffs when the money is won and lost? Those are my concerns about White and Conner. And I know that you're not primarily, you know, like James Conner getting you to the playoffs in a managed league, that's all you need. Then you can add waiver wire. So it's a different game in best ball land in that sense. But would you be concerned in something like best ball, the quality of these offenses? I've always been of the idea with running backs, I kind of don't want you to be on a great offense, right? Like I don't want the running back from the Chiefs, even though they're going to score a lot of touchdowns. Like, but I want you to be on offense kind of like the Lions, like good O-line, good team, not great team, right? So how concerned are you with, I mean, just how bad things could be in Buccaneer and Cardinal land?
Sure. I think that like as far as those running backs go, like from more of a redraft perspective, I mean, I tweeted this out the other day that, since 2000, for running backs to average, 15.8 touches for a whole season, 99% finished in the top 20 running backs. The only running back that didn't was Ray Rice in 2013. Every other running back has finished as a locked and loaded top 20 running back if they just hit that touch threshold. So it really doesn't matter about the teams. The other thing that's really interesting, like you pointed out, was that, are they going to ride James Conner late into the season? But he had 4 of his highest snap shares last year when their season was completely over. I mean, no Kyler Murray was playing, and he had over a 90% snap share. And I think 4 of the last 6 or 7 games of the season last year.
That was with Cliff, though, right? So things.
That's a good point. That is
Cliff, right? Like, so we don't know how.
Man, you're right.
I say Thailand Cliff because he just once he got fired, he just up and went to Thailand and lived on the beach for a couple months. Lived his best life.
And he might not be doing that again. So I think that's really interesting about James Conner. Are they going to ride him again? Because again, the coaching staff is definitely a lot different, and that could change things with the philosophy of how they want to run their team. I think that Rachaad White is probably a little bit safer because, I think that he's younger. He's more likely to break out. I mean, Ryan Heath pointed out that, 50% of running backs make their first top 12 appearance in their second season, of any year, which is by far the highest for any year. And I think Rachaad White is a prime guy to do that. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on someone like James Cook that also kind of falls in that range, but may not be like the workhorse size type back that we're used to.
Yeah, I think for best ball land with James Cook, I originally was way more into Damian Harris just because, I think Damian Harris is good at, a good running back, much better than Devin Singletary at running the football and has breakaway speed, right? Whereas Singletary, one of the slowest starting running backs when he was on the Bills, he could get you 20-yard run, but he's never taken it to the house. Harris, a legit good goal line back, scored 15 touchdowns the year of Best Ball Mania 2, so 2 years ago. But all the news out of Buffalo has just been extremely positive on Cook. I think for a managed league, it's possible. It's difficult to decipher the weeks to play Cook because we're not expecting a huge goal line role, right? We are expecting a lot of 40-yard. There's not a lot of running backs that have his explosion. And as much as we want him to be a pass catching back, he was pretty disappointing in that role with Buffalo last year. He just didn't get the usage, but Josh Allen does actually check it down. So he's a pretty big priority target of mine right now where, I think I'm comfortable saying Rachaad White will have a lot more 10, 15 point games, right? Consistently. Whereas Cook may have a couple 5-point games, but I also think he'll just have some games where he houses 2 touchdowns or gets a lot of work. And maybe even has some contingent value if, as just kind of being a de facto slot guy. And then if Buffalo is going to run a lot of 12 personnel, Cook can kind of, with 2 tight ends on the field, Cook can kind of go out into the slot too, as a second slot on the side of Kincaid. So just betting on the quality of the offense in Buffalo, I'm in on the Cook train.
Love that. Is there anyone else in that range real quick that you're kind of in on that you're find yourself targeting if you're not in on Rachaad White or James Conner?
For me, it's Dameon Pierce. Okay. Just the quality of the O-line. They get to play the Titans twice in the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 and week 17, which the Titans were good against the run, but I think this team could be very bad, right? They have literally the worst O-line in the league. So I don't think they're going to be holding on to the ball too much. I thought Dameon Pierce was really explosive, right? Just had a lot of usage last year. Singletary is a fine running back, right? But I still think Pierce would get the goal line usage. And then, the other guys in this range is I think the floor of Cam Akers is very low, but he also has a strong ceiling, as we saw. It's so hard to read through the Cam Akers. It's okay, they beat up on the worst run defense in football in the Bronx, a team that loudly quit. They didn't quiet quit. They loudly quit to end the season. And then again, it's the Marshawn McVay fighting thing. I think J.K. Dobbins, it's easy to see the smash case for him for best ball land, where it's like, I mean, if this I think he's just having a contract dispute. I don't think he's actually injured. DeAndre Swift, I just want to bet on the quality of the O-line in the Eagles, where, again, I think Swift is very live to disappoint, right? Where it could be Penny, it could be Gainwell. But I just think that the Eagles are a smart organization and they didn't trade for him for no reason, right? And then, yeah, like I do take James Conner, I do take White, but if they're not as, I don't feel as confident about their high ceilings, more as like a consistent, solid floor, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's move down the board. How about these running backs here? Because this is the range where I'm very comfortable. So I'm talking from like Charbonnet down to Damian Harris. I think this is a tier of itself. All the running backs in here. And you've even seen guys like Tank Bigsby start to creep up there. Who are the guys in this range who you would want on your teams? So, Pacheco's fallen down here. Kamara and Javonte are still here. Damian Harris, Brian Robinson, Rashad Penny, Pirine, Dalvin Cook, Devin Achane. So we have some running backs of old, some running backs of new. Who are the guys in this range that you think have the best chance of piling it on this year?
This is like it's comfortable, but it's also terrifying in this range, partly for me, because you have guys that I want to draft desperately, like Alvin Kamara and Javonte Williams. Like Kamara's worst finish in his career was the running back 13 in points per game. And whether the report on his muscle leg asymmetry is fair or not, I think just like drafting the best running back on that team that's been consistently really great is never a bad bet to make. There's also the Javonte Williams whole miraculous recovery thing that people keep talking about. And like similar to what you talk about is like, I think the Broncos to me could be like a Lions type situation last year where, the change in not the same for the Lions, but like the change in offensive coordinator with Sean Payton coming in and a better overall offense. And if Javonte Williams actually did make this like miraculous recovery, I think that he could crush his ADP early, because I'm not a believer in Samaje Perine. I think the other guy in this range that really sticks out to me is Rashad Penny. Like I know that the floor is like astronomically low, but I think the ceiling is as high as any player in this range, because I actually think that if you put Rashad Penny healthy for 17 games versus Miles Sanders last year, I think that Rashad Penny has a higher finish than Miles Sanders. With how much of a zero that Sanders was as a pass catcher, I think Penny's really interesting. And the other guy that I'm sorry, Liam, if you hate him, but I just will never quit on Antonio Gibson. I mean, again, worst finish in his career so far, running back 27. New offensive coordinator that, favored pass catching running backs in Kansas City. I know, different offense, different team, but I just think that his range of outcomes is so much higher when he's finished as a top 13 running back in 2 out of 3 years. And I think that his pass catching upside could get unlocked more with Eric Bieniemy than it did in the previous coaching regime. And I think that he's someone that I take a lot of. And I think the last guy that is interesting getting pushed up boards is Tank Bigsby. I'm just not much of a believer in Travis Etienne. I would love to be. I think there's like a really good bull case for him, but he's one of those people that keeps me up every night, and I'm a big Tank Bigsby fan.
Yeah, a lot of these guys I draft a lot. Some of them I haven't. I think it's key for anyone listening that's confused in the distinction. In redraft land, you get to choose who hits your lineup, right? And that's obvious, but it means that you can just bet on upside with every single pick. Completely. And like if you take Javonte Williams and he doesn't look right week 1, you don't have to play him until he does, right? Yep. If you take Rashad Penny, you get to play him when he's healthy, and if he's hurt, you don't have to play him, right? Same with Gibson. If you find out Brian Robinson's getting too much work, okay, you don't need, but you're swinging at upside with every pick. I like to kind of do that in best ball too. First off, on this channel, we call Rashad Penny Rashad Dollar. Again, won me $1 million, and that bring back against Amon Ra. I have a lot of Penny. Reports out of Philly have been unclear about the Gainwell, the Swift, the Penny. It seems like all of them are in the mix, but I think Rashad Penny's the best runner of the football in the NFL, even better than Nick Chubb. So if he's there for 17 games, he's going to absolutely smash. Priority target for mine. Antonio Gibson, and Brian Robinson, their ADPs have flipped. And originally, Gibson, and neither of these, they've not risen too much, but Gibson started in the 130s, and I was taking him in every single draft. I'm finding it harder to click him now just because I have so many teams with him in the 130s. I still think there's cases where Gibson smashes, but also Robinson, because, I mean, the dude was literally shot in the leg, came back and played solid. I don't think he's as much of a plotter as we might think he is, where, I mean, he did catch some passes in college. Again, the dude was shot. So, like, what does that do to your ability to catch the ball? And then it's like Sam Howell, the rushing quarterback, how much is he going to be checking down to the running back? So I've kind of been, in my portfolio, just been taking more Robinson recently.
Okay.
But I like Gibson a lot too, especially on a PPR site. I think it's a priority target. Bigsby, I've just been clicking him the whole time. He opened in the 15th round. He went in the 11th here. I don't think that's prohibitive to getting him if you don't have any tank in your portfolio. I think ETN, we know he's a breakaway runner, right? He's probably not going to be this pass catching guy. So I still think he's fine for best ball, but for redraft, I think he'd be pretty frustrating. Where it's like he's going to have he's going to be like a more expensive James Cook maybe. And so I like him in best ball. I have some because he could have that 3 touchdown game against the Panthers week 17. But agreed, where I want a lot of tank as well. And then on Kamara and Javonte, I was not drafting these guys at all to start the season. And now I am more. I still think Kamara could be really frustrating because, I mean, you have Jamal Williams, who is like the ultimate touchdown vulture, and Taysom Hill. Like, I literally could not think of 2 dudes who are bigger touchdown vultures in the NFL on the same.
Batman and Robin of touchdown vultures.
Right. Yeah. And Kendre Miller's there too. So Kamara was not good last year. Some are saying that practice reports are that he looks a lot better. So I'm a little bit concerned that the wheels have fallen off a little bit, plus the whack-a-mole of the offense, plus like their schedule is super easy. If you look at the Saints schedule, like they just frankly have a very easy schedule, but I'm worried that they could be winning a lot of games like 24-17, so let's just talk about Javonte a little bit. Are you buying that he's like fully healthy and good to go, or like or is it just like close your eyes? He was good. Let's roll the dice.
I think for me, it is definitely not like, oh, they're saying he's healthy, so like let me go draft him, because I think a lot of the people that I trust as far as like the medical people that analyze these injuries have not been like, this is like would be like the historical outlier of all historical outliers. But I think that like if he plays, I think that he is going to find a way to produce early, because like every running back that's ever played under Sean Payton has been really successful. And I think they'll put him in positions to succeed. And I'm also like, as much as I say that at the same time, like I'm just not sure how much I am like a believer in Samaje Perine. I mean, like he had a chance like early in his career to have like a high volume of touches and couldn't even finish in the top 40 running backs. So I just can't imagine how this like journeyman running back, changing teams for not a lot of money when they have someone like Javonte Williams is magically going to just like take over this big pass catching role. I mean, Samaje Perine last year had 95 carries and only one of those carries went for more than 15 yards. Like he is not explosive. So I think I'm more betting on the fact that you can get someone like Javonte Williams all the way in the running back 30 range. And if he does get healthy, even by like week 6 or 7, like he could just be absolutely dominant in the back half of a season. So I think even in best ball right now, I find myself taking him just because, if you can find a way to have other running backs to just be great for the first, 5 or 6 weeks down the stretch, I think he's someone that could carry people to championships. And I think that I'm just kind of betting on that, because you don't see players like Javonte Williams like that deep in drafts. But also if they are that deep in drafts, there's probably a reason for it.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned about just like, I think Sean Payton is obviously a great coach. I'm a little concerned that the Broncos could be just bad again. Or just like Russ could be bad, but Stidham was actually like pretty good with the Raiders. He is the backup there now. So I want to get more Javonte for sure. And I agree with like for best ball fantasy, all the money's won in the end, right? So if you can carry, even if he is a slow start, if he could be right by week 7, week 8, you'll probably take that to the bank. And yeah, P. Ryan, I think, is serviceable. He catches the ball. He's a good pass protector. So I think he's going to like play third downs because of that. And Sean Payton like made him a priority target, but I don't know. Maybe Javonte is just like went to Sweden and got some stem cells or something and like is beating science. Let's go into the dumpster diving range at running back here. Round 12 plus. Who are the names you want to stick out to you here? And or are there any running backs not that were not drafted in this draft, which there are plenty of there are plenty of running back 2s and 3s where we just frankly do not know who the running back is. And I'm personally gambling on them right now. These are guys like Cam Akers' backup, Austin Eckler's backup, Jonathan Taylor's backup, Saquon's backup, Pollard's backup. So there are a lot of running back 1s that go in the first and second round that the fantasy community is not comfortable trying to guess who it is. Alexander Madison's backup. Plus, you have the idea that Kareem Hunt, Fournette, or Zeke could come and throw whoever we're drafting to the wind. So, talk us through any of the names you see here, and if you have clarity on any of those backup situations.
Sure. Well, I think like one of the obvious ones, definitely Kendre Miller, like you talked about with Alvin Kamara. Like, if the wheels did fall off, he doesn't come and look like himself. Like they drafted him in the 3rd round for a reason. They have Taysom Hill, they signed Jamal Williams, and they have Alvin Kamara, and they still said, let's use a 3rd round pick on Kendre Miller. Like this is not a team that's playing in the AFC East with the Patriots, Bills, and Dolphins. Like this is a very winnable division with an easy schedule. So if they're building for the playoffs and they're drafting a player in the 3rd round, like I'm definitely going to take shots late, even though I still like Alvin Kamara. I think he's really interesting. I think the other one that is interesting in this range, and like maybe this is a bad way to look at things, but really interesting, just playing the range of outcomes game, is Raheem Mostert. I know he's over 30 years old, but he came out and said in interviews that Mike McDaniel told him he's going to see more work this year. So if they don't sign a free agent running back, and Devin Achane is really small, and historically those running backs that small do not see a high volume of carries, at least in their first year. I think that Raheem Mostert on this offense could find his way to be like maybe a Damian Harris of old at best, where he ends up falling into the end zone a lot. He still has that elite speed, but we're also talking about a running back over 30. But Omar Kelly, who's a beat reporter for the Dolphins, said that Raheem Mostert's the lead running back. I know it was Jeff Wilson a little bit last year, but if he came out and said that, Raheem Mostert's the lead running back right now, like why not take shots late? I think a couple other guys that, are never going to, make you happy and make you want to call your mom and be like, guess who I drafted today, are like guys like Zamir White and Gus Edwards. I think we all go back to that one time with James Conner when Le'Veon Bell sat out. So if J.K. Dobbins ends up sitting out, or especially Josh Jacobs, if he's sitting out, I think that those guys could be really valuable, especially Zamir White is the one that I'm targeting a little bit more, because I think if you look at what running backs have said publicly, it sounds like to me that Josh Jacobs seems like the most willing to like, sit out for a year and prove his value. And when, Zamir White right now is still pretty much going for free in certain drafts, like I think that he's someone that I'm definitely willing to take a shot on. And I think the last guy that a lot of people I trust have been touting a little bit would be someone like Tajay Spears. Just because Derrick Henry, again, the history of running backs that age, I know that he is the anomaly, but if Derrick Henry magically goes down, like I know it's still not a good team with a bad offensive line, but I think that Tajay Spears is someone that could see like a ton of touches if something happens to Derrick Henry, and I don't think that he's going to have much competition for it.
Yeah, I mean, on this team, I got Zamir and Tajay Spears. So music.
Oh, I didn't realize that was you.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize I was hyping up your team. Wow.
Well, Zamir. I mean, the Athletic had an article about Zamir yesterday, and it's about how he's like running up hills and doing farm work, and I don't know. It seemed bullish for Zamir. I've been drafting him since May, just as like a athletic freak. 4th round pick. Josh Jacobs probably is not going to get 5 trillion touches again, and or might sit out. He's really climbing up boards. He seems to be a running back to the market is gambling on now. He was previously undrafted. Now he's a 15th round pick. Tajay Spears, I think we're a little bit worried about his long-term viability with his lack of MCL or something, but they drafted him in the 3rd round. He's going to play this year, and Derrick Henry could be traded. Like the Titans' first 6 games are very tough. It would not surprise me if they lost all of them. They are Vegas dogs in all first of their 6 games.
Wow.
And if you're at the trade deadline and you're 0-6, you're probably rolling with Will Levis. And you might even, if you can get like a 3rd round pick for Derrick Henry, ship him off to the Chiefs or something. If something happens to Pacheco, whatever, you probably do that, right? Now I don't know if Tajay would get that much work. I don't know how big he is, but and then on the Mostert train, I want to be in because he's very explosive. But what I'm worried about is, and how I've been thinking about is, I kind of want the guy who's going to be the goal line back in Miami for best ball, because I want the guy who can steal the touchdowns when Tyreek or Waddle are pushed out at the 1 yard line as like leverage against them. So like, and I think Jeff Wilson would be the goal line back, but I'm open to being very wrong there because I'm straight guessing, right?
Yep.
I think Miami listed them as like RB1s on their depth chart. Depth charts right now, absolutely meaningless. Obviously, I think Dalvin Cook wants to be a Dolphin.
Agree.
Will the money be there? No one knows. And the way I've been thinking about Mostert is he is the explosive breakaway back, which is also a chain, which is also Tyreek, which is also Waddle. So it's like, I don't know if I want to be competing for the explosion touches. Who do you think would get goal line between Jeff Wilson and Mostert?
It's
so they both have in the past.
It's so hard to say because I think it could be both of them. The only thing that I think that I know that Wilson played in front of Raheem Mostert, even though Raheem Mostert was there first last year, and I think that's notable. I just can't get over the interview of Raheem Mostert sitting down and being like, well, they limited my workload last year because I was coming off an ACL, and Mike McDaniel promised me that I'm going to see more touches this year and see a lot more carries, and I don't know. Jeff Wilson, I think his career high is 125 carries. I don't think that Raheem Mostert is really much beyond that if he is. But I think that we've seen a higher ceiling from Raheem Mostert in the past. So because we've seen a higher ceiling, because he's being listed as the lead back by a beat reporter, and because Raheem Mostert is saying in an interview that he's going to see more touches, I'm going to make that bet a little bit more. I'm not here touting Raheem Mostert as a top 40 back. I'm just saying.
Yeah, he went in the 13th round.
I think Dalvin Cook ends up a Dolphin, and this ends up being completely irrelevant. But if he doesn't, I think that he could be a sneaky good value because of that. But you made a really good point about competing for the explosive touches, that he's not really the one that you're going to be leaning on.
Yeah. In best ball, we know Mostert can house a 90-yard touchdown anytime he touches the ball. Jeff Wilson could be cut, right? I think any of these guys could be cut. Yep. They're pretty cheap, so probably not, but really uncertain. Let's put your hand to the stove here, and I'm going to make you guess who the RB2 is in a bunch of situations.
Okay.
And you're allowed to say free agent if you think it's just so very unlikely that it's okay. So let's start with Eckler. Do you think it is Kelly or Spiller?
I think that is going to be Josh Kelly.
That is, I think, the favorite. Almost never drafted, by the way.
Yeah.
Let's go with Saquon. Do you think it's going to be Breida or Gray?
As someone that's been a Breida fan for a long time, I'm going to say Eric Gray.
I've been drafting more Gray than Breida. Breida's just old, but Breida's not that different from Mostert. He's fast. He's not explosive, but he's fast. Tony Pollard. Do you think it's in some of these situations? There's 3 names. Do you think it's Rico or Malik Davis or Deuce Vaughn?
I'm going to say free agent. I
think that. You think it's Zeke?
All I'm saying is that if Tony Pollard goes down, they are going to sign someone better than Rico Dowdle or Malik Davis. I just can't see them going forward with those guys as the lead backs if Tony Pollard magically missed half the season. I think they bring in somebody that would just end up being like the bigger option at that position.
If you had to choose between those names, who would you choose?
Oh, that's like I know either way you're like picking, it's like picking your favorite children, even though you hate all of them.
Just choose one.
I think I'll pick Malik Davis.
He's the one who's been drafted the most. I think Rico came out of nowhere. Has a decent athletic profile. But yeah, I mean, I don't think like it's just like who's gonna mix in, because like if Tony Pollard gets pushed out the 2-yard line and is tired, who's gonna get the shot? That's the guy I want. I do not see Zeke returning. If Zeke does return, that's probably a good sign for Tony Pollard. Jonathan Taylor. Evan Hull, Zach Moss, Zach Moss broke his hand, but he will return, or Deion Jackson.
I think it's definitely Zach Moss or Evan Hull. I know that Zach Moss looked okay last year, but I'm going to lean with the upside of Evan Hull, that hopefully by Jonathan Taylor will play the first few weeks and he'll give Evan Hull a little bit to get up to speed. I'm an Evan Hull guy as someone that like a little bit more of a pass catcher than Zach Moss has shown to be. So I'll lean there.
Yeah, I don't think Zach Moss is that good. I've been way more on the Hull train, but he could be a 0. Ramondre Stevenson. Do you think it's Pierre Strong or Kevin Harris?
I think it's Pierre Strong. I'm going to lead towards the athleticism rather than more of like a bulldozer. I know that maybe some typical Patriots running back might favor more of like a bulldozer type running back, but I'm going to lean Pierre Strong. I think that he was someone that I really liked before the draft. Patriots weren't the best landing spot, but I think that he's got to be the most explosive running back after him by far.
Yeah, reports have been mixed in camp where it's like Kevin Harris is getting some goal line work, but Pierre Strong is an explosive dude. So, and it's unknown how much of a workload Ramondre will get. It's like I draft a lot of Ramondre because I think he's very good. He's a big dude. But the Patriots are weird. They could just be like, you know what? We're going to a 3-way committee. Breece Hall. Do you think it is he Abanikanda? Scored a touchdown in the preseason. Do you think it is Michael Carter? Do you think it's Donovan Knight? Obviously, Dalvin Cook is in the mix.
I think that if it's not, I'm going to say free agent. But if Breece Hall goes down and they don't sign a free agent, I think it's going to form like the ugliest 2 or 3-way committee we've ever seen at running back. Like, I don't think it'll be anybody. So I'm going to lean free agent. Hope it's, they only sign one of those free agents if Breece Hall goes down. Yeah.
And I mean, Breece Hall is going to be fine by like week 5. So it doesn't really make sense to play Cook a lot of money. I think Abanikanda would be like a poor man's Raheem Mostert, where he's like a breakaway runner.
Yeah.
But it's really going to be whoever's best friends with Aaron Rodgers in the locker room, because Aaron Rodgers is kind of a weirdo. And so, like, whoever will have his ear, if that's Michael Carter, if that's Donovan Knight, if that's Abanikanda, like, and I just kind of like see Michael Carter and him jiving. I don't know why, but I could just like Rodgers is not a rookie guy,
Yeah, that's a good point.
So like we just got to read into that. Joe Mixon. Travion Williams hurt his hamstring, but he's back at practice. Chase Brown, athletic guy, taken in the 5th round. Also, Chris Evans is there, who another real athletic guy, so he could be like the 3rd down back. So between those 3, who would you choose?
I think it's got to be Chase Brown. I think that has the most upside. He's the guy that I actually really like right now. If Joe Mixon's whole inefficiency thing comes true and they magically hate Joe Mixon or if he gets suspended, I think Chase Brown is the only running back there that I could see being a workhorse. I don't ever see that being true for Chris Evans or Travion Williams. If any one of them is going to magically turn into a 3-down running back, it's Chase Brown.
I agree. Chase Brown has the most upside. He's the guy I draft pretty much. He's the only one I draft in that room. I draft a lot of him. I'm a little worried he could just be a stone 0 though, because I could see it being like Chris Evans could totally be the Pete Ryan role, but it's going to come down to pass protection. I've been looking for Chase Brown buzz. I see a couple runs on Twitter. That's really all I've found though. Let's move on to the Vikings. Alexander Mattison. Are you going with, this is another 3-way one. Are you going with Chandler, McBride or Nuanu?
I think before that, like, I think just from an athleticism profile and in college production, I think that I was definitely a McBride guy. But I mean, the Athletic came out and said it's a two-way race between Chandler and the Kenny Ngongwu. But I think that it's probably going to be Ty Chandler. That's like what the beat reporters have been saying so far, that it's probably giving the edge to Ty Chandler. Again, I think it's really hard to say, and it's probably would turn into a committee, but Chandler would be the one that, again, hand on the stove, that I'd probably have to go with.
Yeah, it's reports have been mixed, where like one reporter's saying they all look like ass after Madison, and so they're like definitely bringing in a free agent, and then the next report will be like Ty Chandler runs a good run today. So Chandler's the guy I draft the most of. I am wondering though if McBride will just be the goal line back. Like, he's a big guy, right? I think. So I don't know. Cam Akers, do you think it's Kyron Williams or Zach Evans?
Oh, that's really tough. Well, it's hard because they just, came out and said the other day there was an article, that dropped about that, like, they might not even like Cam Akers that much now, magically, where they were like, Cam Akers is the, best running back we've drafted. We like him more than Todd Gurley. And now they're like, well, the Rams really like Kyron Williams in pass protection. So like, I would want to say Zach Evans before, but them saying that they think that Kyron Williams could take over passing downs definitely scares me a little bit. But I just love like the profile and the prospect of Zach Evans. Yeah, we're comparing fifth round guy to a sixth round guy, but upside Zach Evans. But right now they're saying Kyron Williams.
Yeah, Zach Evans. I used to only draft Zach Evans. Kyron Williams, very unathletic, but he's catching passes. It seems like he might just be the third down back. Like, there was a report about Cam Akers. Like, Cam Akers got Matt Stafford blown up last year. And then there was another report in camp that he's like was not great at pass protection. So Cam Akers was a guy I was drafting early, and now I'm just worried that he could be like back in the doghouse again. Like, McVay and him have a very weird relationship.
Yeah.
So I've been taking, I kind of been confidently taking Kyron as like, this guy's at least like, I think Chase Brown way more upside, but I'm confident that Kyron's like going to have some points this year. Like a poor man's James White. How about Rashad White? There's Chase Edmonds. There is Sean Tucker, the undrafted free agent. How are you seeing that one? And this is the one that, like, if you're going to gamble on, like, obviously gambling on Jonathan Taylor's backup or Josh Jacobs' backup is probably better than gambling on like Rashad White's backup.
Yeah, this is really tough because I think that like Keyshawn Vaughn is a little bit more size than Chase Edmonds does. So part of me, just like for the size of the running back, like I wanted it to be Sean Tucker, first of all, like, but it's not going to be. It doesn't sound like. I know Keyshawn Vaughn's in a contract year, so backup running back contract year narratives, obviously. But I think that like I'd probably lean Chase Edmonds just for the upside. I mean, like, he's shown before just for a couple games of like, if, Rashad White comes down, that like Chase Edmonds can, carry the load for about 3 games a year. And I think similar to what we talked about for James Cook earlier, that like Chase Edmonds is probably the most likely guy that I could see come in and like have like 2 touchdowns in a game. So I'm probably going to lean for the upside if I'm drafting anybody and go with Chase Edmonds, but I don't blame you if you're going Keyshawn Vaughn. That one's like dead 50-50 for me.
I think that's the last one where we don't touch the RB2 from.
Yep.
Before we close on some offenses we think could be underrated, talk us through the Chiefs running back room. How are you seeing things between Pacheco, McKinnon, and Deneric Prince? It seems like a lock to make the roster.
Yeah, he seems like a lock, but well, first of all, I think they pointed out that CEH has been getting the most first team work. So I'm like, I want to believe in Deneric Prince, but again, they've been giving CEH like the work so far. I think that they seem to really like Pacheco. I'm not going to be drafting Pacheco because I think that they love Jerick McKinnon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a better pass catching running back than Pacheco is. So like, I think Pacheco is just going to get overdrafted because he's the Chiefs starting running back. And, he looked really good in the playoffs last year. But I think if I'm drafting anyone at cost, it's probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think Jerick McKinnon, he's still over 30 years old. And, whether this gallbladder narrative with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is true or not, like, he's still a first-round running back on his rookie contract, where Jerick McKinnon is over 30 years old and had a really nice stretch. I know they trust him, but I'm not drafting those guys. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is way cheaper than both of them, and I'm just drafting him and hope that he finds a way into like a big role, because I think he's the most likely to be like really good down the stretch if he somehow takes over like the largest workload.
Yeah, it's a headache. I don't draft Pacheco either. I do draft McKinnon somewhat. It was bizarre. He like what happened at the end of the year where he was just like lighting the world on fire, and then I think he got hurt and got sent to the shadow realm. No lock to make the roster at his age, right? I think he's like 31.
Yeah.
And it would just be funny for CEH finally to go like undrafted and to have his best year. All right. So when we talk about offenses that we think are underrated, let's focus on the quarterbacks in this range. Let's not, we don't need to talk about the Niners, but these are Jordan Love, Bryce Young, Jimmy G, Stroud, Howell, Ritter, Stafford, Pickett, Kyler. For me, I have some optimism about Jordan Love, where I'm not ready to say that this guy is bad. It was like literally one snap against the Eagles in garbage time, but he looked good on that. You don't have to be that good to hit Christian Watson on a slant and for him to take it to the house. So, yeah, I think pace of play could still be a slow thing. The running backs are going to get their work, but I mean, Jordan Love could be good, right? Like, I don't think anyone knows how good or bad he is just because he sat behind Aaron Rodgers. Could be a good thing, giving him a chance to develop. How do you feel about Love optimism-wise, and which quarterbacks and offenses are you rolling the dice on here?
Yeah, two things. I mean, one, like I'm really interested in Jordan Love because like they were saying all offseason, Jordan Love came out and said like this offense is way different than Aaron Rodgers. It's a very up-tempo, fast-paced offense. This is not like let Dr. Rodgers diagnose the defense. They said, no, this is going to be up-tempo, fast, in-your-face, bully ball. That is not like the like orchestra type, like, musical, classical audience that, Aaron Rodgers, is going to run in that type of offense. So I think that's interesting. I love Christian Watson. I love the reports that we've been hearing about Luke Musgrave. I'm not necessarily a Romeo Dobbs guy, but I think that like they could be sneaky, and Jordan Love's getting too much hate right now. But I don't necessarily love him. I think for me in this range, I really like Kyler Murray.
Play the Vikings week 17, who I'm ready to say could again be one of the worst defenses in football.
Especially when they lost their top 4 cornerbacks, and Jawan Williams, who I'm a Patriots fan, is like he couldn't even stay on the Patriots, and now he's going to be like.
And their top 4 draft picks are like not starting for the team. They're like
it's crazy.
They're literally like in the 4th string, so it's all bad from Vikings D land.
Completely. For me, it's Kyler Murray in this range. Again, like he's been one of the highest points per game quarterbacks this year. I know it's ugly where, no DeAndre Hopkins, is Zach Ertz even going to come back? But I think just purely from an upside standpoint and what he's done every year in the NFL, like I know he's coming off an ACL. I'm willing to bet on the upside of Kyler Murray. The other guy that I really like, not necessarily as a player, but the situation is like Brock Purdy. I mean, a quarterback in this range that has 2 top 20 NFL wide receivers, a top 3 tight end, a top 3 running back. Like he has the best weapons in the entire NFL right now. And I think that, the fact that he led, fantasy QBs and points per drop back last year, and, he was the QB 18 or better in every one of his starts, like doesn't mean he's going to be good. But like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he takes a step forward in his second year and he has these crazy weapons and he finds his way into like a top 15 or top 12 finish purely off a crazy touchdown rate.
How about between Kenny Pickett, CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young? Who you rolling with there?
Kenny Pickett. Just not staying away from rookie QBs in that scenario.
I'm just like
but Matt Canada gives me absolutely no confidence.
Yeah, I'm rolling the dice on the rookies over Pickett. Okay. Like I'd probably think the Steelers could be good on the run in the run game, but I'm just worried that he's not.
I would lean for Stroud though over Bryce Young, just because of the offense. I have no belief in Adam Thielen or Terrace Marshall whatsoever. And I think, like you said, that I'm more of a D'Amico Ryans guy and trusting that like he can kind of get this team to play for him.
All right. Well, Alex and I have to run, guys. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned into this. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Alex, tell the people where they can find all of your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Alex Caruso, tweeting out all kinds of good stats and information for people. You can find me on Twitter TikTok and Instagram at Alex Caruso NFL. And there's also, make sure to check out that Twitter because there's a couple big things that are going to be launching in the next couple weeks that I think are going to be really exciting for fantasy football players and a lot of people that play, DFS and player props.
Hell yeah, man. Anything else you want to close with? Any tight ends you might love in these cheaper ranges? Really anything.
Yeah, I think that I would not be shocked if we see a revolution of rookie tight ends in terms of Luke Musgrave and Sam Laporta. I think that, I know rookie tight ends are never really that great, but just off of the roles that these guys are going to see from week one is just completely unheard of. And I wouldn't be surprised in these middling good that could be really good offenses if some of these guys end up breaking out. But otherwise, draft Rachaad White. I know that you're not in on him, but Rachaad White is going to put some people on notice this year. And if he's going to be on your fantasy team, you have a much better chance at winning $1 million.
I mean, I have a bad history of just fading the league winners. Did not have enough Josh Jacobs. So it would just be poetic for me to, again, be clicking Dameon Pierce sometimes and just Rachaad White 300-point season. All right, guys, I'll be back. I'm going to be jumping on with Davis to talk through some drafter strategy. So look out for that on his pod. Going to be back tomorrow night doing a main event recorded team with Kyle Dvorak and Davis, facing off against the ship chasing crew and others. And I'll be back for another video tomorrow. Have a great day.